We are getting closer than ever to the first version 3 Starship flight, but behind the scenes, SpaceX is pushing hard at Texas and Florida with huge progress on the sites. With that, here we have a newly announced future that seems to blend science fiction with reality, and it seems like that wasn't near enough for the week either, because NASA dropped the mother load here around the future of the Artemis missions with SpaceX and Blue Origin, and gone is the lunar gateway. Yes, after digesting all this, there is more to unpack here than many may realise.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hey, Mark S. House with you here, and as we continue to patiently watch the preparation for the highly anticipated first version 3 Starship Flight 12 to arrive, SpaceX is continuing to squeeze every last bit of data out of the test vehicles that they can before the beast takes to the sky. On the super heavy side of things, the B-18.3 test tank, which will validate the hot stage and grid fin design, has been partially reconstructed and repaired. Avid space cameras had a nice view of it rolling out of Gigabay 1 and into the ring yard here, and the team spent the next couple of days working on it. Although it doesn't appear to have any significant design changes over the previous configuration, what it does now have are these new additions, just as we suspected. These pieces of hardware were previously being stored in the Sanchez area of the production site and will be used to stress test the 3 grid fin sockets in multiple directions. They want to test all the expected flight forces beyond the needed limits to ensure that the design holds up as expected. Well, it was soon making its way towards the Massey's test facility to be put through those very tests. That wasn't the only test tank being put through its paces this week though, as we could see clearly with the help of RGV aerial photography. The S-39.1 tank is completely strapped into the can crusher now using the blue cap and 20 individual rods around the outer perimeter, all to kick off the big squeeze. Now, the cameras are too far away, obviously, to see that squeezing effect, but it was filled with cryogenics even before the booster test article made its way to the site. It seemed to have gone well because it was soon detanked without incident. Now, in terms of progress on the booster and Starship stages for Flight 12, we know that Booster 19's next step was having the full set of 33 Raptor engines installed. What wasn't so clear was whether or not Ship 39 was done with its cryogenic testing campaign, or whether it would need more testing before the engines were placed. We thought they may be wanting to do some more thrust ram testing like we saw on previous ships, but apparently not. Instead, it seems that SpaceX was happy with what was learned on the S-39.1 test tank, because we were already starting to see not 1, but 2 vacuum Raptor engines rolling out if you look very carefully. They came out of the Raptor's nest building attached to Gigabay 1 where they are stored, and rolled into Gigabay 2 with the Starship. In front of all this, of course, the Gigabay continues to grow with more cladding sections coming in this week. Speaking of cladding, we left you last week with a huge new pre-cladded roof for Pad 2 being lifted. That is now firmly placed on top and the crane was soon detached. That looks wonderful now, especially with this wall in front here. Indeed, after all this time we have the return of the gateway to Mars. I can't wait to see what Sean will be able to capture with us here when the full stack is on Pad 2 and the sign is all lit up. Thanks, as always, for being subscribed here so we get to be out there to do this each week. I've got to say, it has also been a fun week of investigations at the Florida sites, all thanks to Greg Scott helping us here with this. Kicking right off with the biggest elephant in the room, so to speak, the Gigabay here is now monstrous. How sleek does that look with all of that cladding installed, especially with the lack of external bracing? Unlike Starbase in Texas, it appears that this will only have the single lower entrance for each corridor on the one side of the bay. To compare, in Texas, they have both of these entrances as well as one for each of the 6 workstation locations next to the Star Factory. On the opposite side, we can see that they've now started installing the first walkway above the full height door, so this will leave about 90 meters of height for a Super Heavy to roll out. That should even be enough for that version 4 booster hinted at several times now. Not far off, we can see where those tower sections were previously stationed. Interestingly, SpaceX seems to be completely reworking the layout of the site here because all the footings are now invisible and the ground has been flattened. Even a part of the tent where they've previously made the launch mount is being taken apart again. What we do see here though are parts for the top water deluge pancake for the next mount at Space Launch Complex 37. It's just staged inside the other half of the tent over here, so it does seem that they'll be building at least some of the next launch mount here. I mean, perhaps that groundwork is simply to finally add a concrete surface to improve the working area. After all, it can get pretty muddy out here with all of that Florida rain. Close by, we still see the tower, arms and carriage progressing for that same pad. If we head over here to Slick 37 itself, and even at this distance, you will still notice the progress. We even have this new angle thanks to Harry Stranger and Planet Labs. As we can see, all of those 9 tower sections have recently arrived here, and they are staged at the far end of the site, waiting for the tower base to be ready for stacking. This is getting closer because the tower base pile cap has already been poured, and that huge LR-13000 crane is seen here right next to it, fully assembled, ready to go. At the end of the jib, the main parts of the tower base are sitting here waiting, so we will soon see that rise. If we look a little bit further south, these 4 rows in the soil indicates that piles were dug here. That, we think, is very likely where the main cryogenic storage tanks will go. So yes, thanks Greg and Harry for giving us these views to check out, and links to their social media and Patreon are in the description, so give them a follow if you aren't already. Now, you may remember that we have just recently had this announcement that xAI would be merging with SpaceX as part of a pivot towards orbital data centers. Well, that is kind of dwarfed by the follow-up announcement this week as SpaceX plans to take full advantage of the moon. This now becomes a joint project that involves not just SpaceX and xAI, but also Tesla. This almost absurdly ambitious plan, which feels like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, is called TERAFAB. What they want to do is make the largest chip manufacturing facility in the world to power the many products across each company. Think chips to place into all of these constellation plans, and also Tesla products such as Optimus robots and the self-driving fleet. Elon kicked off here explaining this staggering 100 million square foot factory as the planned size. Just to put that into some kind of perspective, here's that area compared to Starbase in Texas, assuming that it would all go on one floor. They will go vertical with it too, of course, so it's not going to take up quite that land space, but all the same, it is insane to think about. The reason for making such a massive plant is because the total amount of compute currently available to buy worldwide is about 20 gigawatts, which is far less than the 1 terawatt target that is apparently needed for both SpaceX and Tesla. Of course, the ultimate question is what on earth could possibly require about 5,000% more compute than the entire world currently provides. I mean, it would certainly be great to see more capability worldwide considering the shortage going on, although admittedly, this is all caused by this crazy AI race that the world seems to find itself in for better or worse. Anyway, many of these chips would find themselves into these data processing satellites that SpaceX has been talking about, and check this out, they have absolutely huge solar arrays with the comparative radiator. What is also bizarre is that this is apparently only the mini version that would generate 100 kilowatts of compute for each unit, but bigger versions they want to target will be in the megawatt range. This high-tech sci-fi future would need to start somewhere, of course, but they are still talking about the distant future and adding 1 terawatt of compute annually, which would require 10 million tons to orbit each year. Now look, to me this is just too far down the line of this scale to really dive into. They even went right down the line talking about manufacturing these data satellites and launching them from the lunar surface with a mass driver. The thing that everybody needs to remember is that you need every element's raw materials extracted from the lunar surface, many of which would be very difficult and some perhaps impossible in useful quantities, and then you need to set up every layer of the industry from mining, processing and manufacturing. It's worth checking out Dave with the EEV blog channel here because he did a great video recently which dives right into the ridiculous complexity of the supply chain that it takes to do what we do on Earth now in regards to compute capability. To set all of this up on the moon would take, I'm sure, many decades, assuming that the robots haven't already taken over. So yeah, that's just my opinion, but that doesn't mean that we can't dream big. Regardless, even baby steps in this direction with Earth manufacturing would be an amazing thing to see kicking off. As always, I would love to know what you think about all of this. Now, this week might just be the beginning of something bigger than we have ever seen before. NASA conducted the Ignition event, unveiling more depth into their new plan to build out a permanent human presence on the moon. I am so thrilled that we get to be in a position to cover all of this, and of course, with the team doing everything along with me, the costs add up fast, and that is why we are so grateful to be sponsored by Surfshark VPN. They provide the tools that we have become more and more reliant on over the past few years. It's no secret that many countries now are having access to all sorts of news and media hidden away. That makes it really difficult just to get well-rounded access to what you need. All these frustrating virtual walls blocking your passage outright, or arguably worse, demanding all your identification information before you can even use a service or system. You have seen all these stories out there, of course, and it is all mostly being done without the support of public consultation. These policies just seem to be getting rammed through whether any of us like it or not. That's where Surfshark VPN steps in to help though. This virtual private network creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the country you choose. Once installed, you just pick the country that you want to appear to be browsing from, such as New Zealand here. Then you just hit refresh and that's it. You now appear to be browsing from within that country. You can use it simply as a browser extension only like this if you prefer, or you can install the app so that all internet traffic is routed through it. It is also great to have on your phone so that if you find yourself needing to connect to public Wi-Fi at airports or accommodation, you can just fire up the VPN for added protection. I mean, you can even use it to compare prices from different countries when trying to find more affordable travel options, because it is common for prices to appear more expensive to select countries. It's so great because with the one subscription, you can have it installed on all of your devices at no extra cost. In fact, you even get a 30-day money-back guarantee. Check it out by heading to surfshark.com/Marcus or use the code Marcus at checkout to get 4 extra months for free. You can also scan the QR code right there on screen to get started. Thank you, Surfshark. Okay, so back to NASA's Ignition event this week. We have been very excited about the shake-up around the entire Artemis architecture that Jared announced over the previous few weeks, but there wasn't a huge amount of detail that came with it at the time. We knew that Artemis III was a brand new mission that would serve as a test to evaluate the moon landers in low Earth orbit, and they then wanted to land crews on the moon at least once a year following the Artemis IV mission for 2028. Well, we got a lot more released this week. They first confirmed that the Artemis II mission was still looking good for an April 1st launch, and that is still looking to be the case, so this coming week is looking to be an epic one. Moving further into the future though, we have now had NASA confirm that they are replacing the exploration upper stage with Centaur 5, so United Launch Alliance do have a bigger part to play here moving into Artemis 4 and beyond. Now, speaking of Artemis 4, listen to this statement by Dr. Laurie Glaze.
Both of the providers are required to complete a successful uncrewed landing prior to carrying any of our crew. We've been looking and talking with both of the providers. SpaceX has been considering alternatives of the HLS Starship design while implementing a more streamlined approach to try and speed things up and pull things forward.
Now, none of us have got any idea what that actually means. I wonder if SpaceX may be looking at a shorter lander for initial missions, but there is nothing but speculation on all this, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. As stated here, both SpaceX and Blue Origin have asked if they could please remove the near rectilinear halo orbit requirement for the missions, which would reduce the workload required for the HLS vehicles and improve the surface mission planning. NASA has already agreed to begin looking into other orbit options, so it sounds like they would like to have an orbit closer to the moon that gives a better outcome. Now, we of course had much more than a near-future Artemis update here. This extended way out to a full-scale shift in the strategy. As we had hoped, NASA is now officially pivoting from the Gateway program and is putting all of its resources and efforts into building a lunar base. Something built step by step with a relatively clear plan, one mission after another. If you have been watching along here for a while, you would know that I've never really loved the idea of Gateway and the near rectilinear halo orbit requirements. It's a constant radiation hazard for one, so it never made sense to me for humans to spend extended periods up there in my opinion, and why restrict HLS missions and return options with this huge orbit that makes timing and planning for every mission more difficult than it needs to be? Well, we know one of the critical reasons for that plan was largely due to the limited architecture of the Space Launch System and all the stages above with Orion stacked on top. All of this didn't have the Delta-V requirements to use a low lunar orbit. With upgrades to the SLS now already cancelled, Gateway seemed like it wouldn't be far behind, and now we have that confirmation. The great thing is, however, much of the hardware developed for Gateway will still be repurposed for the lunar base, so it isn't really wasted. Carlos Garcia Galan, the deputy manager for the Gateway program, is now the Moonbase program executive, or as he puts it, the Moonbase guy. If you haven't yet listened to his talk on how NASA is planning to proceed, I've got that linked in the description for you, because it's the first time in a long time that I've felt like NASA are moving in a clear direction towards this reality. The Moonbase program is split up into 3 phases. The first phase kicks off right away this year and runs until 2028. NASA aims to land 21 missions on the lunar surface in order to place down around 4 metric tons of payload. This will include multiple commercial lunar payload services missions and also a crew mission with the Human Landing System vehicle either by SpaceX or Blue Origin. They will also develop a lunar communications network by sending 2 satellites around the moon, aiming to bring the throughput to and from lunar orbit to over 500 megabits per second. I can't wait for that, and to be honest, it's strange to me that we don't already have that capability. NASA is still very seriously looking to be aiming for Shackleton Crater as an area for key research. Because this is twice as deep as the Grand Canyon, areas in here have permanently shadowed areas or significantly low periods of sunlight. This is a really great animation of how the sunlight moves around the top of that crater. If you are inside here, power systems are critical, of course, because you can't rely on solar power. Why choose to go into this tough area though? Well, it is because we believe there is a lot of water ice and other useful materials to exploit down there. It may in fact be one of the most important areas of the moon to explore. Moving on, we also have a series of lunar terrain vehicles coming, such as Viper, which is to land on the Blue Moon Mark 1 lander. NASA wants future vehicles to be no more than half a ton, be capable of driving up and down 20-degree slopes, and be able to survive up to 150 hours in shadow and the temperature considerations that come with that. Now, even more exciting, I think, are these awesome moonfall drones that they've mentioned. NASA plans to send 4 of these up so that they can hop up to an altitude of 1 kilometre or so. They want several hops, each lasting around 150 seconds from launch to landing. With all hops combined for an individual drone, they will have it, ideally, covering around 50 kilometres or 31 miles of distance, which would be a massively useful amount of survey data for each drone. They will, of course, host optical cameras, so hopefully some live stream opportunity there, and various other lightweight scientific instruments that allow them to survive the lunar night between missions. This will be incredibly exciting to watch, and with it all in the first phase ending at the end of 2028, this will obviously be a challenging timeline with a challenging $10 billion budget, so they better get moving. On to the second phase starting from 2029. This is all about preparing for the Moonbase while expanding the capability, all while having a monster mobile habitat to explore with. NASA aims to fly 2 crewed missions to the moon every year at this point. This will mean around 27 rockets lifting off from Earth and 24 spacecraft making its way down to the moon. That will put a whopping 60 metric tons of payload on the surface. Here, they now want to be generating energy on the moon using nuclear radioisotope thermoelectric generators, or RTGs. This is absolutely crucial if the area is in darkness a lot of the time. Now, getting to this rover, here is this fantastic pressurized beast being built in collaboration with JAXA, and this is going to allow astronauts to travel a long distance. This is 15 tons by itself, which will be able to carry 3 tons of cargo. I mean, it is essentially a mobile habitat with a 10-year lifespan. They also specifically mentioned excavator rovers to start working on the area to prepare the uneven surface for the missions that follow. With all this power, communication and rovers being supplied, there is a lot here, and this takes us through to the end of 2032. Now, even when delivering 60 metric tons to the surface with all of this complexity, the investment still seems to be $10 billion, so that looks even more optimistic again. Now, once they have established a semi-permanent presence, they look forward into 2033 and onward, which increases the target lander payloads to 8 tons to the surface. During this phase, in comes the habitat modules, fission surface power, the start of in-situ resource utilization capability, more rovers, and even capability for cargo return missions back to Earth. In this phase in total, they want a colossal 150 tons of payload delivered to the surface before the end of 2036. Now, for this 4-year period, I would like to point out that they did add $10 billion plus this time. Now, Carlos did say that they are looking at trying to achieve the near impossible here, which is certainly true. You do need to dream big, though, to make a huge impact, and certainly it is inspiring to watch the planning phase of all of this. Now, obviously, with all of this focus on the lunar missions, this means a big shift elsewhere. That means not so great news for the future of low Earth orbit habitation. With the International Space Station reaching the end of its life, NASA would still like to find a way to maintain a continuous US human presence orbiting Earth. The hope was that a commercial market would help share some of the costs, but NASA now doesn't believe the market will be big enough to be self-sustaining, not without the agency carrying most of the financial burden. To try to ignite the market though, NASA is still looking at expanding private astronaut missions and even opening up the commander seat to paying customers. For now, they have announced that they'll only be awarding one contract under the commercial LEO Destinations program. Of course, with only one provider, it becomes a bit more of a gamble. As an example, back in 2014, both SpaceX and Boeing won commercial crew contracts, and over a decade later, Dragon is the only spacecraft flying crew reliably. That means that if NASA had only picked Boeing back then, which seemed the more obvious choice, well, you know where we would be. Still, in order to achieve this lunar plan without drastically increasing budgets, something must go. Interestingly, NASA have also proposed an alternative which would have a commercial space station module docking with the ISS well before it is deorbited. That way, they could gain operational experience while helping transition cargo and critical infrastructure over. I am intrigued to see how companies like Axiom, Vast, Sierra Space and others respond to this, and whether there will still be a way forward that keeps a station alive in orbit. Now, along with all that exciting news, NASA has also announced that they are finally bringing nuclear electric propulsion out of the lab and taking it into deep space. Yes, they have set another ambitious target of doing this by 2028, launching Space Reactor 1 Freedom. This will be the first nuclear-powered interplanetary spacecraft. It will head to Mars and perhaps even beyond. On this mission, they want to repurpose the Gateway's power and propulsion element to power it, so again, there should be little waste in the cancellation of Gateway. Once at Mars, it's going to deploy a fleet of next-generation Ingenuity-style helicopters to continue the aerial exploration of the planet. We had just the 2 batches of Starlink satellites being sent into orbit this week, so a quiet week for Falcon 9 for a change. Sunday morning, the Starlink Group 1062 mission was away from Space Launch Complex 40. 29 were in the stack for this, but we only got an external shot of the fairing falling away rather than the stack itself. The touchdown for this one was on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas, and that was landing 27 for booster 1078. We were waiting right through until Thursday afternoon for the next. Group 1717 here, obviously leaving the Vandenberg pad behind with 25 on board. Again, no shot of the stack, so not sure why we didn't get to see those this week. It is, however, nice that both missions were in daylight, because there is the next gorgeous shot of the landing on Of Course I Still Love You. Touchdown 23 there for booster 1081. Now, getting back to the International Space Station, on Sunday we had another resupply mission with the Progress MS-33 launch. It carried over 2.5 tons of cargo in this mission, but what was quite amazing about this, I think, is the speed of the repair here at the launch site. This mission was originally planned for late last year, but that was delayed. Why was that? Well, you may recall after the liftoff of the crewed MS-28 launch, the huge maintenance cabin that sits under the Soyuz was damaged. Well, the whole cabin was actually liberated from its location here and ended up falling into the flame trench. The repairs only took several months, which to me seems super fast considering that damage. By this week, they were all ready to go, and of course, the launch went perfectly. A little issue though, one of the Progress MS-33 rendezvous antennas failed to deploy. That was preventing the use of the fully automated docking system. Instead, the spacecraft performed a partial autonomous approach, stopped about 200 meters from the station, and needed cosmonaut Sergei Kuznetsov to manually guide it in remotely for docking. So there we go, my friends, a week just packed full of exciting new information to dive into. It sure was the week for announcements, wasn't it? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe so we get to keep making them. Again, a massive thank you to Surfshark VPN for helping us put in all the work we can into these videos. If you want to continue with more space awesomeness, check out this video here next. Thanks for watching all this way through as always, and I'll catch you next week.